Good evening. I would like to call to order the Keizer City Council, and a work session is Monday, January 22nd, 2024, and ask our city recorder to please call roll.
Councilor Reed?
Here.
Councilor Hessman?
Here.
Councilor Kohler?
Here.
Mayor Clark?
Here.
Council President Starr?
Here.
Councilor Duran?
Here.
Councilor Cross?
Here.
Thank you very much. Each year, halfway through the biennium, we get a check-in on our short-term goals, kind of figure out where we're at with these that are posted here in these beautiful frames for us to continue to refer to as guideposts for the work that we are doing. And in particular, this is going to be helpful as we next month head into the long-range planning task force, kind of a framework for where we're going from here in this, completing this year and looking at the 24-25 budget. So with that, I'll turn it over to our illustrious team to get started. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Grateful to be able to present the update on the goals, and grateful to have all the staff here to answer questions that may come up in a little more depth on some of these issues that pertain directly to their departments. So feel free to ask questions along the way, and if I don't know the answer, then more than likely the person that knows the answer is around the dais here. So I'd like to think of this as the phase one of our budget, because I'd like to do is have a review of the strategic priorities, or in this case, the short-term goals, the goals we have adopted now. And then the long-range planning task force is what I have always called the phase two, which is the forecast. How much money do we have? So you put together what's important, how much money do we have, and then you come up with your target. And hopefully if we get those things right, then we can put together a budget and bring you a budget that matches with that. Instead of bringing you a budget that then you say, well, this is important to me or this is important to me. We want to get that up front. So it's a good way to start. So this is phase one of your budget. So we have short-term goals, we have long-term goals, cover all of them here tonight. Starting off with, and we'll go in the order that they're on the in the plaques back there, or in the frames back there. So starting off, we have the UGB discussions. We started out this year talking with the Council of Government, the Willamette Valley Council of Government, and saying, could you be the convener for this discussion around the urban growth boundary? They wanted to play that role. They were happy to play that role, and they've coordinated a few meetings for us already. First one being back in August. They pulled together a meeting with McCrae, who's the planner for the COG, myself, and the people that wrote the letter back in 2019 about when the city asked the DLCD what are the avenues we have for expanding the urban growth boundary. So we actually had the author of that letter on the phone. Fortunately, still works for DLCD, and we went through that letter, and one of the options in there was kind of ruled out, and that was just doing it through DLCD would probably be the most unlikely path towards doing it. The more likely path of an urban growth boundary expansion is through the governments, which in our case is a little bit odd, but Salem, Keizer, and Marion County makes sense, but Polk County also has to be at the table because they are a part of the combined current growth boundary, since it's a Salem-Keizer growth boundary. So what has to happen is all four of those governing bodies have to agree that there's a split or an adjustment to their growth boundary. The other path is the legislative one, and with Senate Bill 1537, there's an alternative there to have a one-time expansion of the UGB as long as 30% is reserved for affordable housing. So there's really two possible legislative routes. That would be the one, which is the governor's bill. The other one, which is what was done in Eugene and Springfield, is actually just a separate bill to split the Salem-Keizer growth boundary. So it wouldn't be done through SB 1537, but it would be done through a legislative bill sponsored by somebody in the legislature.
Councilor Hussman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Brown, if you don't know the answer to this question, I completely understand because there are going to be a lot of moving parts this legislative session. But what is the state meaning at this point when they're saying affordable?
80% of median family income.
80%. Okay.
Yep.
Just wanted to make sure whether that was a state definition or whether that was still fungible or something to be worked out state policy-wise.
Yeah, it's in terms of Senate Bill 1537, that's how it's defined.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what we also need to do is explore the impacts of a UGB as part of the decision-making process, not assuming that it's a foregone conclusion that we expand, but so looking, and that's what's in your goals, is that you want to look at the housing, the employment, and transportation. And that's really one of the reasons we contacted the COG, because to use their planning capabilities to look at those effects. So we haven't touched that part of it, but we need to do that as part of the analysis of the housing, employment, transportation.
So, Council President Starr?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to clarify on Senate Bill 1537, and this is a two-part question, is the expansion, the one-time expansion in that bill only for housing?
The way I read it this morning is it is, yes, for housing. You have to have a 30% housing piece in order to get it done.
30%. Well, I want to clarify that because 30% of the total expansion for affordable housing, or is the expansion only for housing as long as 30% is designated affordable? That's two different things.
Sure. So from my understanding, again, not a lawyer, but there is two of them here, so they might be able to get this drilled down. But from what I understand is this is very specific to housing. The bill's being driven by the housing need in Oregon. And so the expansion is a one-time expansion for housing,
Only.
of which 30% has to be truly affordable. And I think it's like for 60 years, if I remember right, the language in it. It has to be held for truly affordable housing. And there's a time frame that it has to be that way. So, but my understanding is it would not be for the things like employment land or the other things you would look at for your analysis of a UGB expansion.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Lindsay?
And as this, if there's changes to it, am I on? So you can hear.
Yes.
If there are changes to it, and we'll be happy to keep an eye on it to see if that changes, because, until they finally.
Until they sign a die.
Yeah, until it gets signed. So that seems to be the answer right now, if that helps.
As of now.
Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and I have a follow-up.
I just want to clarify, did this bill come from Legislative Concept 19? Is this the one? Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll follow up, Council President Starr.
I just want to make sure that in regards to the expansion of the urban growth boundary, that when any of those discussions are occurring with our elected officials, that we are working as a council, we're working as one voice and as a team, and not having any one-off conversations that maybe the full council isn't aware of.
Absolutely, and on top of that, this is a community-wide conversation because the urban growth boundary conversation, as we saw in feedback that we got on so many of our surveys, people want more land and urban growth boundary expansion, and they want small community, small town feel. Last time I checked, those don't intersect very well. So I think we still need to have further conversations with our community about what this looks like and to what extent. So once we know what we are doing as a community, then we can figure out the nuts and bolts. The legislation can be written, but we have to drive the legislation, in my opinion. And that comes from us and our community driving that conversation. So thank you for follow-up on this, so we'll have informed options to be part of that conversation.
And I think the due diligence needs to be done up front before we engage the public to say, here's what the impacts are, and then invite the engagement plan.
Okay.
So one of the steps the COG wanted to do is to first get the administrators of the communities together, and then when it's elected bodies, it would be elected bodies talking to elected bodies too. So, but she wanted to start with the administrators. But we also have to do the study work on those, especially around those areas of housing, transportation, and employment.
Okay. Anything further? Council President, or sorry, Councilor Cross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So my question is, because I heard a couple different things, so is it working more with the 4 entities, as in the county and the city, or is it work with the legislators? Like, what's going to be more effective?
That's what's up for discussion that I think the council will have to have is this. If it's only housing, then this governor's bill might be away. But if you want to do something else, then we have a separate legislative bill that just is, got sponsored by our legislator, but we have to get the whole state, Senate, and representatives to concur to it. Or the other path is to get the elected bodies of those 4 jurisdictions to say, yep, we agree. And I mean, if that, it could be as that simple, but what happens then, they can agree without having to do all the, well, we want this much industrial, this much residential. What it can happen is it's agreed to be split, and then you spend the next 5 to 10 years figuring out what it looks like.
Sorry, just quick
Follow-up?
follow-up. So, I mean, that obviously sounds like it's probably the easiest way, the 4. And then it sounds like this isn't a short-term goal then, realistically?
Well, if we're looking at a 2-year,
I mean, like we put it on last year, so now we're halfway through it. So is this a short-term goal?
I don't know if we can finish it in the next year. That might be difficult.
Okay, thank you.
I think that answers your question, right?
Thank you. And either way, if we look back at Eugene and Springfield, the legislation was written and it took them over 7 years to complete all of the separations. There were a lot of steps in between. So it's like a very, very, very complicated divorce. And even if it's amicable. Councilor Reed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to point out, too, that it is indeed also on our long-term goals. Last year, we were very careful to make this as far as next steps in the, finding out what this was. And so that's why it's on the long-term, because, yes, the whole UGB thing is a long-term project, but the steps to get there and to figure out what we're even asking for was the short-term. So that's why it's on both.
Thank you. I had forgotten. Thank you. Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to recommend that we start the process of the discussion by calendaring maybe a work session for after the short session is done, so we know what the bill says, and then we can discuss it and talk about next steps. So I'd like to see if we can't put that on the list of things to be calendared after the short session. And fairly soon after the short session, because we're going to need time if we want to do anything else that takes a separate bill in advance of the 2025 long session.
I think that's appropriate.
Anybody object to that? Okay.
All right.
Okay, anything else? All right, next page.
Procurement simplification.
Yes, please.
We have a lot of procurement requirements that go above and beyond the state requirements. So the idea was to streamline some of our purchasing. A draft was finished by council, and my understanding is that Mr. Lindsay actually had a review of it, and may have some comments back to the council, but go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, correct. So having, still wet behind the ears, but I did pick this up today and made sure and gave a good looking at the draft that came in from the opposing or the hired outside counsel. And indeed, your current rules don't have as advantageous a range in the types of procurements you do at what price. And so the statutory amounts are more generous so that you don't have to go through as much process because times have changed and, it's not $5,000 anymore for, small procurements, it's 10. And then you guys are the public contracting review board, right? As a local review board. And so you can come up with some of your own rules. And so what I would like to do, depending on what these are your two options, is either I would be comfortable working a little bit more with the outside counsel and bringing back in short order a draft that you could look at and with a recommendation on these sorts of things, or you could workshop it first in short order, and with the idea that that workshop would tease out some of those decision points, and then we could go from there to a draft that I would be recommending to you. So either one of those is fine, but that would be for tonight. You could say within a very short amount of time, either a workshop or come back with a draft that's recommended to you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to hear what folks would be comfortable with. Some of us have done public procurement, so are more comfortable with that, but those who haven't may want some more additional background. So I'd love to hear from you guys which of those two options you would like to have Mr. Lindsay prepare for us. Councilor Cross?
I prefer a work session just because more knowledge is better. Just my opinion.
Councilor Duran?
I'm not really sure. I suppose a work session would probably be best, just so we can feel confident that we're asking for the right things.
Okay.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. So just a clarifying question before I give my preference. Would we, after you connect with outside counsel and came up with a proposed draft, would we then, I guess I'm just curious, which is going to be more efficient for us to do the work session before you have a draft or a work session after you have a draft?
Am I on still yet? So I would say after you have, or after we have a draft, but the draft itself has decision points within it. Mm-hmm. So what a work session would do would tease out what you actually want for those decisions. Say, do you want expenditure authority for your manager to be this high or this low or however? Do you want the ranges to be here or there? And so because you really are in charge of your procurement rules to a certain degree on various types. So if I have a draft in hand, a workshop could still be advantageous because people could have consensus over that.
I want the work session. I'm just asking which is going to be more efficient for us to get to the end goal of having the draft first and then doing the work session, or doing the work session first so then you can give direction to council.
I would think
preference?
having something in front of you that is a draft would be more helpful for you and for the work session.
For you. Okay, so then I would prefer to get the draft and then do a work session.
Okay.
Councilor Kohler?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. What is our current levels of procurement? What are our current rules?
Go ahead.
Well, either way, one of the big categories that we have is between 5 and 50,000 that has some slightly relaxed process. In law now, it's 10 to 150,000, and that's been the case for quite a while, and that's just due to inflation and everything else. But you can hardly buy anything anymore for under $5,000, and so the procurement under state law is you can basically get 3 attempts at verbals for under 20 or under 10,000. The next stage is intermediate, which is 3 quotes, but they're just in writing, and that's between 10 and 150. And then after that, you go to RFP. Here, after 50, we go to RFP, which causes you to have to go through a lot of RFP processes.
And
Does that
it's
help?
rather costly for us to do, isn't it?
Correct. And time consuming. So if you really want to buy something, like say there's a sale on a car, I was speaking about this earlier, this notion that say you wreck a police car and you want to, you know what I mean? And yeah, that never happens. Never happens. But, and it's
did
going to
you do
be
this, Chief?
a year and a half to make a new one, but you just so happen to find one on sale that you can fit with the caging and the, all of the stuff, and you want to make a quick decision on buying it, you don't necessarily want to have to go through a whole RFP process. You want to be able to do that, the lesser type of the intermediate procurement, which just means you can call around to 2 other people, get a written quote, and get it done that, with a much faster process. So,
Thank you.
yeah, that's an example.
It probably wouldn't hurt that we truly understood all that.
Yeah, and I can explain that even more in greater detail in a workshop. So, and happy to do it.
Because I'm sure that there's some of us that have questions, well, spending $100,000 without, it's, budget-wise, I mean, do we know what we can do that with and what we can't do? And I think the work session would give us a clearer understanding of the best way to do that.
Okay,
Yeah, and you guys are the review board, so you want to be comfortable with your process.
right.
Yeah.
Mr. Husman, Counselor Husman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Concur with Mr. Lindsay and the majority generally in that this is a 3-hour discussion that we should not try to have tonight. A work session would definitely be warranted. And seeing a copy of the draft would also be nice because, frankly, as a counselor, this is an area of weakness for me. It would be nice to just be able to review the draft to see what it looks like. And frankly, I think the broader board refresh on the particulars of procurement may be relevant at this time. I don't know how long it's been since Keizer City Council last had a procurement-oriented work session, for example. So maybe never. Maybe never. Who's to say? But I do absolutely believe it'd be worth our time on the dais.
Counselor Reed?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would also like to see a draft accompanying the work session, just so, along with an explanation of the process of how we got to that draft and what the thought processes were and the recommendations reflected in that draft. So again, having a solid document to work with and then also getting the understanding of how we got there. I think that would facilitate understanding a lot more clearly. Otherwise, we just kind of, it's difficult to just go into something and say, we're going to learn everything about this, and instead kind of focus that learning as to, okay, this is what you need to know about this and why, and this is how we came to these recommendations and so forth. So that's what I would like to see.
So I think I'm hearing draft background information, information on the state procurement requirements. I think that'll be very helpful since that is, we operate underneath state law as well. So, and those have adjusted and changed. And so bringing everybody up to speed on what that looks like, and then what is a small procurement, an intermediate procurement, and the safeguards put in place for competitiveness, for open sourcing, and the priority of sourcing, going with your contracts and things like that for open competition. And then what is a request for proposal, our famous RFP, which again, go to acronyms, not everybody knows what that is. So, all right, coming to a work session near us.
Perfect.
Fabulous. Thank you. Anything else on procurement? All right, let's go to the next one. Cameras.
All right, the next slide is on the citywide camera system. What we're talking about here is 3 different parts. One for parks, where we've seen a lot of vandalism, and I want to share with you the pictures of Bob Newton Park the day before the parks tour. They're not on the screen. I don't have them.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. No. Oh man, big letdown there. I will send those pictures to you, get them from Robert and send them to you. But I've never seen a park vandalized that bad. And they did an amazing job cleaning it up for your parks tour. But
It'd almost be a disservice not to see what can happen out there. With the entire parks crew out there all day prepping it so that the city council could come view the park. So that's just one solution, is the parks. The other piece, body cameras, and then the other one is exits to the roads leaving the city. So there's 11 different roads that leave the city boundaries, and what we'd like to do is put LPR cameras, license plate reader cameras, on those roads facing the way to leave. The idea is somebody commits a crime, then the LPR can run through warrants out there, plus they can actually use the intelligence there to say it was a white car, with SUV or truck or compact or whatever. I don't know if the chief knows the details on this one, but because it was told to me by, I think, Lieutenant Nelson, or actually it may have been Officer Phelps. But the Salem has some LPR cameras already, and a warrant that was heading Keizer for this individual, and there was a warrant in Salem for this individual. One of their LPRs caught it, and within hours, the person was apprehended for both warrants. And that's the kind of thing you do. Now, I think we want to be clear, we don't want to put these in people's neighborhoods. We're just putting them in the exits to the city and parks where there's not an expectation of privacy in a public park. The progress we've made on that is we have a quote from one vendor using a competitive or cooperative purchasing agreement, and it's pricey. So we're looking at a quote from another one. Power is a challenge in locations because we have to have bury electricity and new poles for mounting them, and that cost is high. We had some good news this past week that we may be able to work with City of Salem, who manages our traffic lights for us, and they've said that we may be able to access power. That would be a huge cost savings if we're able to mount them to our traffic poles. That wasn't an option previously up until now, so we're exploring it. The police department is exploring that with the City of Salem. If we can't come up with a solution that's within the budget we've put in the ARP funds, then we'll have to scale back and focus on, okay, which parks are getting the most damage to them, which ones are getting tagged most, and scale back on the ones that we're having less problems with, and maybe look at a longer-term implementation of, we get what we can now, and then we add parks, one a year or something like that. So, the chief may want to speak to the effectiveness of cameras in the policing world, but I think it's definitely changed the dynamics.
Thank you. I really did want to talk about this. Actually, it's a pretty amazing where we've come so far with camera systems in neighborhoods. For example, this would be one for the LPR license plate reader cameras. If we could get them on the exits to the city. Over the weekend, we had a couple different crimes occur, and the Ring cameras are great in neighborhoods. Well, they don't capture license plates at all. They just capture the vehicle type. And so what you can do is you can type in a vehicle type, like what we had over the weekend was like a brown SUV with a luggage rack. And it's time and place. So then you just look like within an hour of the crime on these license plate reader cameras, and you can get maybe one or two cars, and then you can kind of figure out by that information like who potentially the suspect is. We've been able to solve a couple homicides locally between Salem and Keizer, Marion County, by using Salem's license plate reader cameras, just by being able to get the picture of the person as he passed by and the license plate. So I don't know if you knew this, but Lowe's just put up 2 or 3 in their parking lot as well that we're going to have access to eventually. So we get a lot of thefts from Lowe's, and we get a lot of vehicle descriptions from Lowe's. But this will put license plate with the vehicle description and the person or persons in the car. So this is going to be a good use for us. And working with their asset protection, people, they're going to give us unrestricted access to that as they give us the crimes and want us to investigate that. So that's going to be a huge deal for us. We've had some big crimes occur in our parks. As you know, we've had some shootings at the Caliga Creek Park, Dearborn side within the last year. A couple of them in the last couple of years, had stabbing there a couple weeks ago. And then just some other, unfortunately, we have, like Keizer Rapids Park is one where we have sex offenses that occur down there at the park, and just be able to identify people coming and going every once in a while would certainly help us a lot. Body cameras is a big one. I'm not sure if you're going to hit on that, but we currently have 4 body cameras that are being deployed on a temporary basis. They're just being loaned out. We have a grant that we've applied for, or that we're applying for. It's due in March, or they're going to review the grant in March, which will cover half of the initial costs of body cameras. So that'll help if we can, once we get those back. And those tie into the video camera systems in the car. So when you activate the car lights, the body cameras come on. And so it's a pretty robust system. It's through Motorola, WatchGuard, Motorola bought WatchGuard. So they kind of all intertwine. But I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have.
I've got one, and then I'm going to go to Council President Starr, and I saw Councilor Cross and Councilor Reed. One of the things that you've alluded to several times is that the overall cost is significant for this. Define significant. What are we looking at? When we're looking at the whole system, we're looking at how much money?
Yeah, so up front, the first number we got from a vendor was $500,000, but that didn't include the power lines, and the poles and power are expensive too.
So $500,000 plus power, that was all in.
And it's kind of it's a large upfront cost. There is a maintenance cost, and the maintenance costs do differ by vendor, and because they're different. The one we're looking at has the technology, or the technology is built around, we have to provide a server for that space, and that data comes into our server room. We maintain it. We're limited by the amount of space we provide and maintaining that equipment. Another solution is that it all goes to the cloud, and we don't have to worry about buying the server and maintenance for it. So there's a couple different routes you can go in technology.
Okay, thank you. Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This has been almost 2 years since I brought this forward and requested to put it in the ARPA, or to use it, have ARPA funds earmarked for it. So I'm getting a little antsy to see the project come to completion. When you talk about budgeting, or when you talk about the funding for it, are we short? What did you set aside for ARPA funding?
I believe we have about 300,000 set aside for it. The bigger challenge, besides just the upfront cost, is going to be the ongoing annual costs.
Here's my follow-up for the ongoing annual costs. My understanding when this was brought forward was having the cameras in the parks and the license plate readers and the body cameras would cut down on the amount of overtime that was expended in solving, or time that was spent trying to solve the crimes. So I'm curious if we have engaged in an exercise between finance and the budgeting and the police department and the detectives on how much have we done any kind of projections on how much overtime we're going to save by having this system implemented and operational, because in my mind, if you are saving in overtime, then that can fill or backfill some of the cost of the maintenance in an ongoing basis. So I'm curious if that exercise or those conversations have occurred. Because if we're holding because of the annual maintenance and that exercise hasn't occurred, I guess I would have to ask why.
Yeah, I think we're holding from the annual maintenance cost. It is a factor in the decision making. It's the upfront costs right now that's preventing it, but we still can attribute hours from Public Works in the amount of time they spent cleaning up. And I don't know if there's overtime for projects in the police department but generally time spent. Yeah, we could talk.
So we haven't had that. We haven't engaged in that kind of an exercise, because I'm
No,
hearing from
we haven't.
Mr. Wood that the annual maintenance and is ongoing costs is an issue, because that's what I literally think I just heard him say that was the concern. And if we haven't engaged in those exercises to figure out, are we going to save, because I've heard, because I've asked the question, that it will help cut down the costs of the investigations and the time spent. So I'm just trying to encourage us to think outside of the box and to get this project done. Please. Thank you.
Chief, did you have something to add?
And I would love to be able to answer that question. Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. It's just, we don't have the camera systems up, and we're not another agency our size that has the same different crimes. It's just all kind of, we would presume. And it would be a really good presumption that we would save time and some overtime hours. But we would only be able to do that, and crime's so different from year to year. We hope we don't have to use them very often, but it just depends on what happens at the time, and then it's really hard to calculate on a number. But yes, it'll save some time. I'm not sure how much.
Councilor Cross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just kind of have a two-parter. So you said you think about $300,000 that we budgeted, Mr. Wood? Where did we get that number from?
That was the initial estimate we thought at the beginning.
Like, did we
years ago.
did we price it out, or we just said 300,000 sounds good?
We just said 300,000.
Well, so I would say, you do great work, but I would say a learning moment is maybe we get real factual numbers before we just throw out numbers. That could probably be helpful in this scenario. And then my next question is when we're going through this, are they in some kind of priority? Like, are they prioritized?
We will have to prioritize the parks there. The locations, the idea is to capture all of the exits. But if it came down to prioritizing, there's obviously some that are more frequent, heavier traffic than others.
I'm sorry, I didn't ask that question. I meant like prioritize, like the citywide cameras or the artificial turf. Is there a priority in these goals?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. So I guess I just want to finish by saying that hopefully in the next budget, that when we are budgeting for some of these big things, that we are being very accountable for the numbers we're throwing out. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to Councilor Reed, on the ARPA funds, as the procurements for that are, we have to have everything obligated by the end of '24. Is that correct? Not spent, but everything has to be obligated by the end of calendar year 2024.
That is correct.
Okay. And as we're going to get a refined numbers on the ARPA expenditures as part of long-range planning and our budgeting, we'll have a better idea of how much is available.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And knowing the cost of the system now, the recommendation, the conversation will be around how to get this one, especially with the refinement around the electrical, because it's 500,000 plus the electrical is what I'm hearing, and figuring that part out will be part of the final recommendation. Yes? All right, thank you. And that was great news to hear about the electrical connections. Councilor Reed?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've heard this, discussion for the last couple of years, and as we were first handed these ARPA funds, we had a work session and decided, a couple of work sessions deciding on how much we wanted to spend where, and that's where that money came from. And then we asked staff to go out and get the quotes to see, because you had to, cart before the horse kind of thing. But I'm seeing this as a very, very complicated process, and it does not surprise me with the moving parts of technology and funding and quotes and all of those things, why this has taken as long as it has. It is an important investment, and I think that we need to be able to take the time to understand what we're getting into, because even so much as the technology of the different systems is very different. And so, we're needing to be able to understand all of that, and we have our staff that has been working on this for 2 years. It's not like it's been backburnered, but they've been working on that. So I appreciate being able to get these updates and be able to kind of understand this process and appreciate how complicated it is. And my question was what Mr. Brown had already kind of started to answer in terms of priority. If we're looking at such a big, complicated chunk of ideas and RFPs and cash and everything, have we looked at these things separately? And I understand, too, that in order to maximize our investment, it makes sense to kind of overlap as much as we can, but to my knowledge, we as a council have not differentiated these three things at all. And I was wanting to hear Mr. Brown's finished thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think we really need to think about them two different perspectives. The one where we have cameras on our exits through our community, that's definitely for solving crimes. The ones in the parks, while they will help solve crimes, they're probably going to do more to deter crimes than solving. If something happens, we'll be able to look at it, but the way you deter crime is by having the cameras and by posting placards that this area is on it. The numbers were not just pulled out of an air, because I've built a system like this in another city for about $160,000. This is more complex because we weren't doing the traffic ways in the last project I built. But for those parks, wherever we put them, the tagging, with one exception, went entirely away. And the graffiti and the vandalism went entirely away. There's one park that was exception, and actually it was after I was gone, but so I was very saddened to see that once they rebuilt this bathroom, and that, anyway, another story for another day. But I think the complexity part that I hadn't involved is doing this on traffic lights.
Councilor Duran.
Just what, there's three parts.
Microphone, please.
It's on.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. There's three parts to this: the body cams, the parks, and the roadways out. What would the budget, where would this line item be on the budget for maintenance and for cost? Would this be, two of the parts are obviously police related, and the other one, maybe not so much. Would it all just come out of police, or is this going to come out of a couple different budgets, line items?
Yeah, that's arguably could come out of either one, the parks or the police. Police being the general fund, parks being a parks fee, but the ongoing maintenance costs would, for the parks ones, would be the ones up for debate. The others would definitely be police, which is general fund. You could argue both. It's a good question.
Okay. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Mr. Brown could correct this, just to be certain what the rough dollar figures now is. The $500,000, I think Chief Copeland indicated, did not include the body cameras. and which he estimated at 75,000 for, that's just so, for clarity's point.
Oh, okay, so it's not all in at 500,000, it's,
That's what I wanted to double check, and Mr. Brown indicated that's correct. So the 500,000 is without the body cams. So it's
Okay.
roughly 75,000 more, just upfront cost on the body cams in addition to that.
okay, so it's 500,000 for the license plate reader and parks cameras, which are fixed, plus power, plus the body cams. So we don't have an all-in, if we're going to do all things at the same time. So I think I heard is, what was this look like phased? That's the word I'm going to use here.
Chief Copeland has the, like I said, 75,000 for the initial cost on the body cams.
You have it, or that's the grant you're applying for?
That is the cost, and we applied for the grant to cover probably half of just the, not the hard costs. There's some other costs involved in that with warranties and different things that probably the grant would not cover. So it would just be the material costs or the body cameras itself, and I'm hoping some of the docking features would be covered under the grant. But again, we're applying for it. It's not a guarantee that we'll get it. We'll know, hopefully, deadline's March, and so hopefully we find out soon after.
Okay.
Mayor?
I'm going to go to Councilor Cross and then to Councilor Reed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief Copeland, so I have a question. I'm not sure if you still have some open positions. So since it's you in a perfect world, would it be you having one or two more police officers, the exit out of the, like, and if you had to pick them in order, what does that look like for you?
That is a great question. Thank you for asking and putting me on the spot right here, right now. I think long-term, we'll get back to the bodies that we need to police this city, and we'll be great there. I think the body cameras are a phenomenal tool and a really good thing for the community. It seems that body cameras are a wave of the future. Like, we need to have them. Like, we've been testing for the body cameras right now, and the patrol officers love them. And I think ideally both, but I think we could operate short of position or two while getting these body cameras, and then working with Tim and Adam and you guys to help fund those positions in the future. But I think for the community, body cameras is a big deal. So hopefully that
Thank you,
somewhat
Chief,
answers.
Because I support you and we love our police.
Councilor Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a,
Oh, I'm sorry, my bad. I did say I was going to go to Councilor Reed.
never mind.
All right, stand by, Councilor Kohler. Thank you, Council President Starr. Councilor Reed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just, hopefully just a short question. So I'm hearing that there's a lot of technology, both hardware and software, that also go into supporting this equipment. Is that also included in that 500 figure, or is that in addition to that as well?
The 500 figure is for the parks and traffic cam. The LPR.
So that includes the computers and the softwares that monitor them, that support this? Okay, that was my question.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Kohler.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. I have a couple of questions about monitoring. What are we monitoring and what are we not monitoring? How are we doing that? How long do we have to keep that recorded information? And what is it going to cost us to monitor to them?
Thank you, Councilor Kohler.
Sorry.
We would only monitor, it wouldn't be more of a monitoring. It would be when there's a crime, we go review the cameras. So it'd be in review, if that makes sense. Are you talking about the LPRs, the parks cameras? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, and then again with the body cams, is that information stored and how long is it stored? And
Great question. So it's all based on retention on misdemeanor crimes, violations, or non-events. So non-events we keep for, I think, 90 days. For traffic violations, we have to keep those for, I think, up to a year. And then for misdemeanor crimes, you have to keep for 5 years. I think felony crimes, you have to keep for a little bit longer than that. So it just based on what we record and who we record. Some of it you can delete pretty quick. And the same for the parks cameras and the LPRs. They'll be set on an overlap basis, whether it be 2 weeks or a month. Depends on the server size and how much money we want to put into that. So probably wouldn't be longer than 30 days that we'd retain most of that. And then if you needed something, what we would do, if you're not really sure what you're looking for, like say we had a major incident tonight where we knew that something happened, we can download the data between specific hours and retain that on a different server, and then go back and review it as we learn more information. So I don't know if that answers.
So the follow-up.
Follow-up.
So the cost of monitoring isn't as bad as it could be. We're not looking at having somebody in an office looking at a whole bunch of screens going, oh, we need to get somebody out there.
No. I went to a real-time place in New York, watched their precinct, and they have lots of people that do that, monitor the cameras and see stuff and respond there. But this would be a review basis based on an incident that occurred, not constant monitoring.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anything else on this one? All right. Let's go on to the next one, which is the artificial turf project. This is at Keizer Rapids Park.
I think we decided the chief was going to do the rest of the presentation from here on.
I thought I heard that too. That was the short straw at the team meeting.
Okay, so the artificial turf project, the bid was awarded last month. I signed the documents today, actually, because our legal assistant was back in the office after our time off. So signed those today. We still need around $1 million to finish the parking and equipment building through either a fundraising or a legislative appropriation. Councilor Starr has organized several meets with legislators to discuss the need, and she's worked with me on that. So we'll be working both routes, the legislative through the federal delegation or through the state delegation. So we plan on applying for a grant through Oregon Parks and Recreation Department for the bathroom piece of it. So we're trying to cobble together some pieces, and if we have businesses that want to, or expertise that want to do parts of it, we do have the engineered drawings, and so it's maybe possible to get some volunteered or donated services. So I'm told that's the Keizer way, and if we can do it that way, then we'll save what we can. So, and we've been working on operations. Last week I held a meeting, and we're doing some follow-up questions on the operations part of it.
Okay. I'll go to Councilor Hussman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Brown and Council President Starr, you may jump in as well. Have Chemeketa, any of the other local universities, anyone of that ilk reached out on the turf field project, the bathroom, anything else?
For what?
Chemeketa has men's and women's soccer programs, as do other universities, and some of them even have sand volleyball as an NCAA sport. Keizer Rapids Park has suddenly turned into this awesome sports facility with the construction of the turf fields. And I'm just saying, if I was the athletic director at, Western Oregon University, it would be really great to have practices or athletic competitions on this side of I-5, where high school athletes who may want to come and see your teams play would be right there, potentially seeing how your team goes and how the community comes out and supports. It's this is me getting a little bit on my sports administrator soapbox, as this is something that I studied and then covered professionally, but I'm a little disappointed at the lack of creativity and imagination that some of these entities haven't reached out to us, because we have this great facility on board. And frankly, it's something that I wish they would partner with us, but they're obviously not here in this room, and it doesn't seem like they've called. So, lost opportunity for them.
We have had a pretty broad involvement on this group. We've worked with the Women's Professional Football League and the rugby club here, and we reached out to the lacrosse group, but they haven't gotten back. They haven't really come to the table much. Our soccer clubs, our high school has been involved from the beginning and continues to be involved, their coaches, because their facility is overburdened. And so they're looking at, so we've had a pretty broad group of people involved in it, but we can reach out to, we have contacts with the Schmeketa, we can reach out, see if they're interested, or Western Oregon. They have pretty nice facilities themselves, but.
They do, and for which I am grateful. At the same time, I certainly think they'd love to have secondary access to fields or available facilities that are certainly practice worthy, if not outright competition worthy. Just that it'd be disappointing if they didn't capitalize. I'm glad, Mr. Brown, that the Women's Pro Football League, the rugby clubs, lacrosse clubs, and others have. Just wondering if there aren't deeper pockets who haven't necessarily looked at Keizer as a good option yet, and they should. So I wanted to call them out publicly.
Just want to get it built first.
Yeah. And I think to that point, that might be the next step is once it's built, build it, and they do come, especially when you have something that was designed and intended, as we heard from Commissioner Willis when he came to us with this proposal, that this be a regionally attractive facility. So I think that once it is completed, you'll see that next wave of interest, and also the partnership for people coming here, booking time at that field and so forth. So what we heard in the original pro forma was that there was the construction portion, but the other part is the interest in the use of the fields and appropriately recouping costs for keeping those funds raised by the fields to maintain the fields. So have it be a cost recovery. So we'll be seeing some of that, I believe, coming from our Parks Division and our staff in the once this is complete. And we'll have a great deal of interest on the part of our travel and tourism. I know that our Chamber of Commerce will be very happy to have another great venue to promote, to bring business to Keizer. That we'll have businesses that want to do events down there. And it's only good for Keizer for building our economic presence in the region. So to your point, I would like to use this as an opportunity to invite. Come on down. This is the place to be in Keizer. So looking forward to that. But let's get back to, since we're about to go to construction. So this is going to go to construction. It is going to be for the field itself. Read in your Friday report, Mr. Brown, that the conversation with the people leasing the home, renting the home, and it's not a lease, it's a month-to-month rent. Thank you. I saw I was about to get corrected on that one. Thank you very much. I heard it. So that's been worked out, or is being worked out, so that'll be all set there. So the additional pieces, is there any questions on these additional next steps that are delineated here? You know, the fields, seeking the opportunities for finishing out the parking and equipment building, and going for the grant for the bathroom. Councilor Cross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have one question. Who is going to manage these fields for like the booking? Is that the Parks Department?
Mr. Lawyer?
That question does not have an answer at this time.
Okay, thank you.
So
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Brown.
When we spoke about operations before, when I said that's what we're talking about. So we have as early as a year ago reached out to one party who has an interest in running them. So that's one of the things we're considering, and we'll probably be putting out an RFP to invite others. But we're looking at several different options.
Okay. So those proposals will be something that you work out because getting reliable operations, bookings, and so forth. I mean, we have that for our event center, for example, and having be responsive to people coming to use the fields, which is part of our customer service. Okay, Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Are we doing like at least like every other month or quarterly updates to the Parks Board on the progress of the turf field? I'm just wanting to make sure they're up to speed on that.
Yeah, we've actually changed that, so we're going to be reporting on that every month.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
March.
starting now?
Yeah, I think they did it this month.
Okay. But were they given a chance to review the plans and everything?
Yes, they had a member of the Parks Committee that was on the stakeholders group.
But it didn't come to the full board to look at or have conversations. It was just a member.
The layout?
Yeah, just in general. I mean, just asking the question, did it come before the whole Parks Board for them to get just as an update before it? I'm seeing no. Okay.
No, their liaison was, do you remember his, I can't remember his name. I'm looking, no, it wasn't, but David was Lisa. Yeah, Lisa was involved too, but David was the official Parks Committee.
So David Loudon officially, and then Lisa Jacob, because you're very involved and show up and are very connected, which I appreciate about you very much. And I'm saying that for the record because we're only audio taping, so that way it gets onto the audio tape. Yeah. I'm not trying to be repetitive, and I'm going to go to our Parks Liaison, Councilor Kohler.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. In regards to Mr. Loudon, I think that he was only at a couple of the meetings. When I asked him about it, he was pretty vague in his answers to what his responsibilities were and how much input he was able to have. So I was a little concerned about that. But that wasn't my question for now, but my question is, how are we doing with sponsors and sponsorships?
So we have a cost, we're waiting on a cost from the supplier that Mr. Lawyer reached out to, and as soon as we have that, we'll reach out, send out the invitations for sponsors. And it's kind of not typical, or it's pretty easy to see the sponsors that are on all the fields from Google. Les Schwab, the Salem Hospital, Salem Health, and the Ford dealerships. And anyway, we have a pretty good lead on who is sponsoring almost every field.
Follow up?
Yeah, Coors Light probably isn't the right one to have out there, but.
I'll take them off the list.
Yeah, let's not go there. We already have a whole thing with alcohol in the parks, and that was, if I remember correctly, according to a former city councilor, a hard no.
Correct.
I was going to get Camel, but.
But I just wonder if there are probably some beverage companies like Coke and Pepsi that probably would want an opportunity to spend some money there too. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. So, yeah, we'll once we have the packages for sponsorship put together, all of us can share that with everybody we know. Perfect. All right, fantastic. Anything else on the turf project? Let's go to the next one.
Thanks for that, Councilor Kohler.
Codification. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Brown.
Sure, I'll take a break, yeah.
I was going to hand this to Chief Copeland, but sorry. So I worked hard on this last month after some delay and making serious progress. The idea now with Mr. Lindsay on board is to shift virtually all my work to him as fast as I possibly can, so that I can work, and exclusively might be a strong word, but virtually exclusively on this. And in fact, I expect to make a big run at it today. As an aside, our assistant, Tammy Harms, was back today after a week's vacation, so she got to meet Joe, and we had our first real work day after having 3 days last week of just sort of getting to know each other and the big Keizer tour and here's some of the files we went through. So we actually went through our system, which, if you don't know, has reminders every day. We had 41 reminders on the list today. We have double reminders sometimes. That's probably about 32 or 33 files. And Mr. Lindsay got some of them, and I got a few to wrap up. And the idea is that tomorrow, like most of them, Mr. Lindsay will get. And then I'll be turning more towards this. I was hoping to be able to talk to my colleague who is a very long time code attorney. This is all he does, who's in Florida, to get sort of some time frame back from him, and I wasn't able to connect yet. But the concept here, this is not going to be done in a month when I leave. But the concept is maybe in the month it'll be at a spot where Mr. Lindsay and our assistant can finish it up. And if not, if I have to come back for a day or two to finish it up because it's some institutional memory thing, then that's what we'll get done. So that's where we are on that project.
The end is in sight. That's fantastic. And for people who are listening to this audio tape, this is taking 40 years, 40 plus years of resolutions, ordinances, amendments, updates, redos, and so forth, and getting it into a consistent code. You see other places with, like the Salem Revised Code or the Oregon Revised Code. This is where you take that and you actually make a code out of all of those things we have passed over the years. And setting aside the dollars and the time to do this is something we've longed to do, and to make that commitment to get this done, and at the same time, download as much as humanly possible from our esteemed City Attorney Emeritus is a bonus. So thank you for that update. Are there any questions on the codification project? All good? Councilor Kohler?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. So if this takes another 3 months, you're good with that, Mr. Johnson?
Councilor Kohler, were you asking me to guess a date here? Or are you telling me how long I have to stay?
How long you have to stay?
Yeah, I'll decline comment at this time. In all seriousness, Councilor Kohler, I'm glad you asked that question, because if I didn't make it clear, I'm hoping to get, I don't even want to guess right now, but I'm hoping to talk to my colleague at Code, Civic Muni Code, or whatever they're called now. I forgot they changed their name, and get an idea what their turnaround time is once I give them my stack of comments. So when I get that, I will relay that to council.
So
follow-up?
Just a quick follow-up. All joking aside, the institutional knowledge that you have is something that we can not replace very easily, and we hope that you are available from time to time on the phone to say, what the heck were we doing here? And you'll go, oh yeah, that was easy. So again, we appreciate all your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else on this project? Let's go on to the next one, the implementation of the agenda management system.
We went live on September 18th with Civic Plus. It's mostly implemented. There's a couple formatting corrections we're waiting on from the coders, but this has improved public process and transparency. It's improved the staff process, made it more efficient and thorough, and it's used right now for all city council meetings and all committee meetings. One of the things that we'll be looking at in the next few months is pushing out the subscription list for email automation, and that will allow somebody to say if they want to get notified when the Parks Committee things go live or a meeting is available, then that'll automatically happen when we push out an agenda. It'll go to a list of people that are interested in that.
So right now, is that being done, not so much, well, it's manual, but you have the list and then you send it out to your list serve, but you have to actually do that. You post and then you actually attach it and send it. It's two separate actions. So the idea, and I'm getting a yes from Ms. Bissett, and I know that's a yes because I've done this work professionally. So once you post, it will automatically send that out, and then the people who are subscribing, that can then control what they are receiving the notifications for. They can go online. I want to hear from Committee A, B, and C, and City Council. Those things post, they get notified. And then they control how long and how often they get notified of city meetings. Is that correct? I'm getting a head nod. Okay. Councilor Cross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Will there be a choice to have this information in Spanish?
Let's see, how are we handling that right now?
Right now, the city council agenda and work session gets translated by Google Translate into Spanish.
Yes, so, but
We
I'm
have-
talking about like with the parks and anything else that they want, like those notes, how are we getting that information out in Spanish?
We don't. That's the council, that's something the council needs to talk about.
Okay, well, maybe we can put it on the goals.
And we'll need, if just a follow-up on that, the cost with those translations as well. Okay, thank you. Councilor Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. How's this working on mobile devices?
It works pretty well. I've used it on mobile devices for the last 8 years. And you can do it from a phone, you can do it from an iPad or a Surface or, yeah.
Yeah,
Good, you'll have to teach me.
we've tried. Yeah, it works great on Chromebook, too. Just saying. Yeah. So we have a great IT department that's willing to do a tutorial for you, Councilor Kohler.
Yeah.
Refreshers are available, no charge.
Ask me about funerals. I can do that real good.
So when I first got my Chromebook, it was a love, mostly hate relationship, and with the help of Mr. Hopkins and our IT department, it turned into a me and Chromebook. We're like this now, so we can't be taught. All right. So thank you for that update. Anything else on the implementation of the agenda management system? Okay. Thank you for the continued work on that. And also, I encourage all of us who are users to get your feedback to Ms. Bissett as the system is refined. And we just heard there are some pieces that you're waiting for to go into code to improve the system. The more feedback we give to the staff leads on this, the more that they can work on refining the process and making it more responsive to the needs of our council staff and our community. So I just want to get that out there.
And if any of the council members are not using the system to make notes and to prepare through it, I think you'd really be pleased with the ability. So if you're interested in using it that way, come see Melissa and I, and we can work with your device to show you you can make notes throughout it, and then when it comes up at the meeting, it's going to remind you that you had a question about this or that. So it's been very effective in other places.
Fantastic. Yeah, I need to. So I too can be taught. I'm going to get into that system. All right, thank you so much. And that was something that wasn't one of the original goals or objectives that I remember, but I think it's a great opportunity for us to be able to make that even more effective for us. Let's go to HRIS.
Yes, it's another one I'm prepared to take lashings for.
Believe me, this predates you.
So, the first request for proposals failed to attract a vendor that satisfied the review team. Ms. Tapina did a simplification of the RFP in hopes that we get it back out and that get some more interest in it. So right now, it's been waiting for the city attorney review and Mr. Johnson update if you want.
And that's very close to completion. One of the concerns with the first go-around was the RFP was perhaps too complicated, so we reviewed that, and we're really close to sending that out again.
So going back to the question we had on procurement ranges, is this one that would still be an RFP required if we had the adjusted ranges, or would it have gone to an intermediate procurement? Just curious.
Yeah.
It would have been an
It
intermediate?
would be under, however, I would really advise, I mean, you can do it, but I wouldn't advise doing something like this. You'd have to have some sort of process. You still,
yeah.
it'd be intermediate.
Right, it's an intermediate.
It's not gonna change a lot what you do with the RFP. Well, what will change is some of the notice requirements.
Right,
But-
okay.
So,
Which is not, could be good or bad, but I was just kind of curious about the simplification of the process because I've done RFP, I've done intermediate, and for those who haven't, and again, we'll learn about this in the, in our work session. And I think it's important I want to kind of understand where this falls. That could make some of our procurement still responsive, still competitive, but more efficient. So just want to get that out there. I'd like to go to Ms. DePina for a comment and then come to Council President Starr. Anything that you'd like to add on this, because I know this has been a high priority for you and your ginormous staff of one.
I have a staff of 2.
Well, you're a team of 2.
Yes. It is still a high priority and now an even higher. Come on. Oh, sorry. Staff of 2, it is even a higher priority now because there's less than a year that I'm going to be here. It went off again. It's going off and on. The implementation of an HRIS / payroll system typically takes a significant amount of time because we're going from in HR, everything being done by hand in Excel spreadsheets.
Oh, God.
And in payroll, everything translating from Springbrook to whatever vendor we use. So it's really critical that we get this on board as soon as possible so we have the time to make that transition, preferably before I leave.
That sounds like a plan. This kind of goes back to that 40 years of codification. This is almost that Herculean, going from Excel spreadsheets. The only thing that could be worse would be a hand. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. Ledgers. Okie dokie.
And we have both. We have Excel spreadsheets for certain things, but other things we will have to actually go to personnel files and pull the data to put it in the system.
How fast is that going to get off your desk, Mr. Lindsay?
Very, very fast.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm more than happy to do it, and it sounds like time is of the essence.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. Council President Starr.
Well, you took one of my questions. I was just curious, when was that first RFP that failed?
The RFP posted in August of 2022. We had demonstrations in December 22 and February 23. It took some extended time to get everybody's calendars coordinated along with all the vendors. There was a first round of demonstrations and then the selection committee had some additional questions, so there was a second round of demonstrations. And it was March 23 when the notification was provided.
March of 2023?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. DePina. And so, Mr. Johnson, I know you said it was really close, but can you define really close? Because really close to getting out the door for me would be tomorrow.
Okay, that's not that close.
Okay, so can you tell me how close? Because I'm just looking at, we're at March.
I think it'll be out next week with working with Mr. Lindsay. It's one of the things I haven't gone over with him yet.
Awesome, so by the end of the month.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, we are on a track to download the collective wisdom experience of Ms. DePina as we are downloading as much from Mr. Johnson. So yes, this is critical.
Point of clarification, I would like to mention that it has not been sitting with the city attorney's office since March. There was a review by both Finance Director, Assistant City Manager Wood, and myself that took a couple of months to try to simplify the process. So I just wanted to make sure on the record that we understand that it hasn't been with Shannon since March.
Okay. Anything further on Human Resources Information System, affectionately known as HRIS? All right, let's go to the next one. Social media policy.
Yes, the council wanted a social media policy. I've got a draft in progress that I've worked from the League of Oregon Cities template, and that could come to the council as early as March if our schedule allows for it. That would apply to your Facebook, Instagram, and X. I was excited to put that X on there instead of the Twitter, but basically, the mayor and I actually sat through a few sessions at the League of Oregon Cities about this, and anything you are doing as a city councilor on social media is considered public record, and our policies don't reflect that right now. So that's what the purpose of the social media policy is, so that everybody knows that when they're acting in their roles, whether that's as a staff or an elected official, that it's recognized as a public record.
Right. Very important clarification. I think there's been a lot of changes in policy, laws and practice and case law, of which I am not an expert. I don't even pretend to understand. It's just like I treat everything like a public record and let somebody else sort it out, which is probably safer, especially if I don't try to play attorney. Any questions on the social media policy? Thank you for following up on that, and we look forward to seeing that in March. Adoption of the changes to our emergency operation plan.
So in terms of adoption of the new emergency operations plan, or what we refer to as the EOP, we are in line for review by the county grant, and we're number 6 on their list of cities in Marion County. So what I was told last is they hope to get to us by the end of this calendar year, 2024. In the meantime, we are at a much stronger state of preparedness. We've gone through and made our own edits to it that will wait till the professionals come in, as in professional emergency planners. And the council has approved the Emergency Operations Plan Review Committee. We needed changes to that because it was outdated. Positions on it were no longer in existence. So it was revised by the council, and Councilor Starr is on the city council's review representative on the review committee. So right now we're still improving our emergency operations training. In fact, Tim and myself are in a training on Wednesday together. So we'll continue to improve our state of preparedness and wait for the county's availability to review our plan.
Okay. I'm looking at Mr. Lawyer, who has been integrally involved with our emergency operations for more years than he probably cared to count. And I'd love to hear, if it's okay with council, some of your thoughts as we've gone through this process to update. You've seen it back in the old days where we were trying to figure it out to today. Can you share some thoughts on this? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, back in the real... It's on.
Now you're on.
Back in the last real event that we had in 1996.
The microphone. New microphones, please.
Thought we had all this fixed. How many times?
I've lost track. Yeah.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Back when we had our last actual declared emergency in the city, 1996, in the operation of the Emergency Operations Center, we flew by the seat of our pants. And we were pretty darn effective in addressing the needs for the community during that event. That was the flood. Excuse me. Part of the reason we were so effective in providing the services and doing what we needed to do is with flooding, you have an advance warning. Okay, we knew it was coming. We had time to plan. Not every emergency is that way. The development of our EOP, the practices we've done, although they've been limited over the years, have really been a bonus for the city and the staff to be prepared for the next real emergency, and I believe that we are pretty well prepared. Not perfectly. I don't think anybody can be perfectly prepared, but we are ready to react when necessary to an emergency in the community.
Thank you. Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I asked to look at the agreement that we had, and it was dated 1996 for the intergovernmental agreement. Can we just calendar regular reviews? Like in my world, our standards are there are certain policies or practices or plans that we have a standard that we review them every so often. I don't have enough fingers and toes to count between 1996 and 2024. So I just think it would be a good practice for us as a city to calendar regular reviews of our intergovernmental agreements, whatever contracts, whatever that is. I think it's just way too long. 24 years, if I counted correctly. 28 years. See, I don't have enough fingers and toes. That those things should be reviewed and updated more often than that.
All right. Great comment, and this was a good opportunity to look at that with the events of this last week. Again, a big thank you to our staff for responding with the ice that we all experienced and opportunities to keep on making this better. So thank you for that. Mr. Lawyer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a point of clarification. Last week was not an emergency. Last week was a normal weather event. So don't confuse the emergency operations plan or the intergovernmental agreement with the county for emergency operations as something that would be in effect for last week, because that wouldn't be in effect. Albeit unusual, albeit longer than normal as far as how long the ice stayed around on the ground and disrupted travel and the community, that was not an emergency. That was just a weather event. So just want to make sure that's understood. And our relationship with Marion County for providing services for the city during weather events, I'm going to say regular weather events, although lack of a better term, has been very good. And I've asked our legal assistant to find the intergovernmental agreement that addresses those services so we can make sure that that still is effective in what we need for today, because I know that agreement is old as well. So.
Okay. Thank you. Sounds good. Take advantage of opportunities to ask questions. Thank you. Anything else on the adoption of changes to the emergency operations plan? Okay, thank you very much. Adapt community center policies and practices to run optimally. I think this one clicks done.
Mr. Wood covered this one, so this is his expertise.
Okay.
I think we're pretty close to being done. I don't know if we're ever quite exactly done with this. We're going to continue to refine what we do every day to continue to provide excellent service to everyone who uses the facilities. But what we've done over the last year, we did bring back the ordinance that outlines the event center, the fees that we charge, that kind of thing. We've gone through that review process and they've been updated. We didn't make a lot of changes. We really didn't make any changes to how the event center is being operated. We just updated the fees to pick up some of the inflationary type of factors that have played in. We have staff on board. They've been with us for a while now. It's a nice place to be after having closed the event center during the pandemic. We're looking at doing some improvements into our chairs. That seems to be the next piece that we're looking at. However, we also have a expansion that we're working on, so we have somewhere to put those chairs. So those are things that we're coming in fairly hot. We're waiting for a couple of pieces on the expansion. Then we'll have the RFP ready to go for that. We're also looking, as we move into this new budget cycle, moving dollars around to make sure that we have an adequate marketing budget. We have a plan that we've worked with an outside consultant to try to hit some of the popular areas that Keizer residents and people who may be coming to Keizer will see the event center.
All right, any questions or comments on Councilor Cross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Wood, I just remember this last year. I think that Lily's budget was about $5,000. Does that sound right?
That's about right, yes.
And it says marketing budget needs to be increased. And I was talking to her because she wanted about pictures and whatnot. Do you have any idea what you're going to increase that to? Because she does need all those new marketing materials.
I know the baseline, we're probably looking at about $10,000.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of things that you want to do, so I would just double check on and maybe really with that advertising can be pretty spendy, like $500 to $1,000. So I don't know how much you think the reach. I would just encourage that if we want to give her the legs, that she is doing great work. My other question is, what about the sign out there? With the name change, are we changing the sign?
Eventually, yes.
Like eventually, like in the next 12 months?
Yes.
And where are we going to budget that? We're putting it on the budget this year?
Yeah, that'll be part of this year's budget.
Okay. Have we looked at how much that will cost?
We have not.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other, Councilor Reed?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was actually just talking to Mr. Brown about this today because the same sign also reflects incorrectly the Keizer Heritage Center. That should be the Keizer Cultural Center. So it makes sense to change both of those now, or now-ish. So, yeah, we talked about that today, too.
Okay. Economy of scale, get them both. All right. Anything further on that? And again, thank you for the ongoing work for making this a welcoming place for people in our community and our visitors. Appreciate that very much. One other thing that we did talk about was AV systems, especially drop-down screens and so forth. That was part of the conversation several months ago. Stand by. Oh yeah, the microphone systems over there too. Is that going to be part of the 24-25 budget proposal?
I will have to check back with Lily to figure out where she feels we're at with that.
We would like to very much, those of us who have used the facility would like to encourage that conversation.
Yesterday.
Please. Because the chairs are good on it. But the screen options, now one of the things people are talking about, the drop-down is great, but the flexibility of space, so there was a yin and yang there, and so I know there was part of that conversation. The microphone systems, things like that, I know there was some work done on that. And the last event we just had, it went very smoothly, I might add. Yes, it was much, much better. So maybe that has happened as well, and you can check that box. But we'd love an update from Lily on those as well, if you could, please. All right, Councilor Reed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'm aware that this is an ongoing process, and we're just going to keep making it better and better and better. But I would also like to put on somebody's radar the need for a couple of light trees, just so that we can highlight some of that presentation area. That was something that I was noticing last weekend as well, as it's very dark. So if we had a couple of light trees that kind of focused on that presentation, that would be nice too. But again, I get that this is a long-term thing, but in addition to audio visual, you might as well be able to see the visual. So, yeah.
I like that. Okay, anything? And the microphones.
Uplighting is pretty cheap, just saying.
Which one?
The uplighting that she's.
Oh, the up.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right, very affordable. I like it. All right. Anything else on this one? All right, thank you very much. Let's go to integrate strategic plan into next budget process. Mr. Brown.
Okay. I fully expect that we'll have something for this next year's budget, not this year's budget. That's why we're using this. As the process has unfolded over the last couple of months, it's become evident that we need to break down the strategic plan into smaller bites. So the good part is we are getting a lot of feedback right now, and it's under the additional engagement that the council pushed for in December. So that's coming, and we will break it down and talk about it starting at the top with your mission statement to your vision, and then goal by goal, however long that takes.
So a follow-up on that will be to calendar out the breakdown, and these would be conversations that we would do, council and staff, that we would continue the refinement and the conversation around planning, and this would also set the stage for our 25-26 goal setting, is what I'm hearing from that. So if we could get an outline maybe of the breakdown, of the breakout, I don't want to say breakdown, breakout of different sections and how we would like to frame that, these conversations going forward. That way we can calendar and plan ahead for the different levels of, different sections of conversation. So if we could maybe get a draft of that, and then we can get council feedback on this timeline works, or this is a bad time of year, that sort of thing, so we can refine it and then plan it out. Plan your work, then work your plan, as my dad always said. Are we good with that? Okay. Fantastic. I've enjoyed actually the news feed, on the Facebook feed of the city's post. I've actually been following that, and I've engaged in a few people with some really nice conversation. Also brought a Parks Potential Eagle project to Councilor Kohler. It came out of that. So there we go.
Like those.
Yes, we like those very much.
Fantastic. So that brings us to the long-term goals, and we just got 4 or 5 more slides. So sidewalk gap and repair program. We have a budget for a program in the ARPA funds, but we need to create that, what that program looks like. Things to think about. Do we prioritize by street, such as arterials, collectors? And then if we prioritize that, do we provide different incentives by the priority? So those are things to consider with the sidewalk gap program. But the idea of this program was to provide a incentive for individuals who don't have a sidewalk in front of them, in front of their house, to be able to make it affordable. So, any questions on that one?
Council President Starr, and then I'll go to Councilor Husman.
What was the trial budget that was set aside for that with ARPA funds? And then kind of my follow-up to that is, are we going to review where we're at as part of either long-range planning or budget committee of where we're at with what we've set aside for ARPA funds, and versus maybe where we're, if we need to reevaluate what we did a couple years ago and adjust it?
Thank you, Councilor Starr. Yes, during the long-range planning process, we will be looking at the ARPA fund and how much we have left and where we spent the money for the last couple of years. So we will do a catch-up there, and that'll lead us to whatever we have left over that we'll need to think about how to allocate going forward. With respect to the sidewalk gap repair program, we do have $650,000 allocated for the strategic planning process, and this is one of the projects that was going to fall out of that. So it's going to be up to the council a little bit to decide how much of that they want to spend on the sidewalk repair program.
I just heard your brain go there.
Was it that loud?
Yeah, it really was.
I'll have to get some WD-40 then for those wheels as they turn. But yes, you heard my thought process.
Yes, I did. Councilor Husman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Brown, we've talked about this, but I just want to put it on the public record. Am I to assume that we want to get this trial program done regardless of any potential stormwater plans or ideas that I know the city has in mind?
Yes, yeah, this is kind of a standalone goal, as I understand it from, and this is common in cities because of the way things develop in Oregon, that you end up having a house with sidewalk, like in the picture, and then you come up on a house. even on a collector street, I walked home in last city from church to my home one day. It was about a mile and a half, and I was on a collector street, and I was on the sidewalk, and then I was on the road, and then I was on the sidewalk and the road, and yeah, it's exasperating. So that's the idea, is to fill in those gaps, and there may be a collector in arterial streets, maybe a priority than a neighborhood street, but.
I think I know exactly the path you trod in that case. But yeah, I do have a specific program to my mind to fill in sidewalk gaps and repair sidewalks. And I have shared it with other members of the council, but I know that stormwater was a continuing consideration. So just something that I wanted to make sure whether or not I kept that in the back of my mind as I thought through sidewalk program. So I appreciate you answering that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Councilor Duran.
So this is probably for Mr. Lawyer, but how is it that the big projects like Verta Lane, Wheatland Road, the sidewalks are included into those budgets for those improvements of the whole streets? How do we make that fair for the people that aren't on those streets and they have to pay for their own sidewalks? So how do we justify these things?
Not sure I have an answer to that. Development is required to install public improvements when they develop property. Those costs are passed on to whoever buys whatever's developed, whether it's apartments, single-family homes, commercial developments, doesn't matter what the building and the improvements are. Ultimately, the owners of that property are going to sell the property at some point, going to lease the property, rent the property. Those costs are built into those sale prices, lease prices, rent prices. When it comes to filling in sidewalk gaps within the city, that's really a choice of the city to say the city's going to pay for it. We're just going to pick an area and we're going to install sidewalks in this area, and residents are going to enjoy that. Or it's a shared cost through local improvement districts, grant opportunities, different mechanisms that cities can put in place for those kind of improvements. Okay, it's really there's some choices to be made. One of the thoughts I've had is to establish a fund for loans. Okay, so Mrs. Jones on B Street wants to put sidewalks in front of her house. There's curbs, but there's no sidewalks. She comes to the city, and we offer her a loan of $10,000. Whatever the number happens to be, 10,000 is easy to work with. That can be set up in a repayment. They pay the full amount back, or the city offers a participatory amount. So of the $10,000 project cost, the city's going to pay $2,000 of that. Okay, the city loans her the $8,000. She pays that back, goes right back in the bucket to be loaned out again. So it's a perpetual fund that keeps itself in place and funded in perpetuity. Could be interest included, could be no interest included. It's really how the city wants to set it up. So those are kind of some of the choices I see to put in place for sidewalk infill projects. Again, development in the city has been required for many years to put sidewalks in when street improvements are required. The development code was tightened up, 15 years ago now, to say that when you partition a property, which is taking one parcel and making up to 3 out of it, if the street frontage is 100 feet or more, you shall do street improvements. Up until that point, it was 200 to 250 feet. It was quite a long ways. So what that resulted in a lot of development happening through those years with no street improvements because they weren't required. So that change added to the gap problem. Because now we have a partition that was done in 92, no sidewalks, one right next door to it that was done in 94 after the code change, sidewalks. So does that answer your question?
I was just more interested in the equity part of it. There's,
Can I follow up with one more piece, though, because something I heard in your question, and to add on top of that, projects like Verda and Wheatland are federally eligible for funds because of the classification of the street. That's where we can get those federal dollars to come in and do those massive, long section improvements and complete upgrades. Chamawa from River Road to Keizer Rapids Park was another one that was able to get federal funding. Dearborn. So some of these larger ones, based on their classification and street volume, qualify for federal funding. The neighborhoods, by and large, do not. They're too small, or they're local streets, and they don't qualify for federal funding. When we did our transportation system plan, those many years ago, what we did intentionally, and I was on that committee, was delineate areas, not street by street, but sections of town that had missing or incomplete sidewalk systems, so that if programs ever became available, that would allow for us to get grant funding, matching funding, or some sort of funding stream, that we would then have something in a plan we could attach it to go in and do a project of that nature. A smaller scale project that was entirely local, that improved the walkability and rollability of a local area, was Delight Street. So rather than putting sidewalks in and all that raised infrastructure, which was going to be a problem with stormwater, Mr. Lawyer worked very hard with every property on that street to create that walking, rolling space that allows for you to move between McNary High School and Cummings Elementary on that street. And Mr. Lawyer, correct me if I'm wrong, that was entirely local funds, correct? Through our street fund?
That is correct. It was entirely local funds.
So how Mr. Lawyer prioritizes developing some of those sectional projects is something that is in our transportation system plan. So you have the big ones like Verda and Wheatland, which affect huge areas of town and are going way back before we were a city, to take a street that was to ancient county standards. Is that a nice way to put it?
Sure.
And bring it up to 2024 modern standards. And the big cost for a lot of those is stormwater. So it's not so much building the concrete, it's managing the water. And as a developer, you understand that, but I wanted to say that for folks listening.
My thinking is just when people are going to come asking, well, how come you can't fix my sidewalks, but you're putting in miles of sidewalks? I just want to be able to have that, us here that can, that will get asked, we can have the same answer. That was just my point.
And I apologize, Councilor Jerome, when you said Verda and Wheatland, my head heard Verda and Windsor Island to development projects. So I apologize, my answer was not even close to what you were asking.
No, I think you really answered a significant part of that. For our local streets, that's really important, and something that Councilor Hussman was referring to was, again, a lot of us have spent time looking into what models can we use to take our street fund dollars, which are local. Is there a way to leverage them? Is there a way to assist on the local streets, our neighborhood streets, where we have either incomplete sidewalks, or in my neighborhood, some sidewalks that have gone to pot? They're a new one, somebody fixed it finally, because my neighborhood's 60-plus years old. So some of those sidewalks are deplorably broken up and so forth, and I know that we can turn in code enforcement, and they're going to be required to fix them. And a couple of times when I've taken a face plant, they've gotten that phone call. Because I was not the person who was going to sue, but the next person who face planted just might. So I saved them the court costs, and I paid for it in Band-Aids. But I think that your point is extremely well taken, and I know that Councilor Hussman, along with all of us, are looking at how do we continue to find effective cost, fair cost for people in our community. If you want a great example of a local improvement district that we did, that's Hornet Court. So that was in collaboration with every property owner. We did all of the sidewalks. Almost all of them chose to take advantage of the price break to do their driveways at the same time. They paid for it, but they got the price break. And the result was an absolutely beautiful redo of a very old neighborhood cul-de-sac. So it can be done.
And that was a very successful project. We actually did the curbs and the sidewalks on that street. Sidewalks were separated, the city paid for the curbs, city fronted the money for the sidewalks, and the residents paid back their cost for their sidewalks. And then also, most of them did the driveways because economies of scale, they couldn't get it done any cheaper than then. So it was a very successful project.
Yeah, and the time that you and your entire staff spent with each property owner was significant to make sure that you were addressing the needs of each property. And that's something that I think is important to emphasize as well. So as we're looking at projects within different neighborhoods, Councilor Duran, really encourage people who would like to do a project, come talk with Public Works and talk with their neighbors. It is something that can be done. But we need to, one of the things that we've talked about over the years is how do we get that word out? How do we have that conversation? I'm looking at Tammy Saldivar, who's the chair of our Traffic Safety Bike PED. These are the opportunities. Yeah, I called you out. I'm glad you're here. These are those opportunities to engage in our whole community having these conversations, to your point, Councilor Duran, to make this possible. So, yeah, this is something that, okay, my soapbox, I'm off.
Can I ask my question?
You know what, Council President Starr? I think it's fair to have you ask your question. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. So just thinking out loud, since we have our traffic safety,
Bike PED.
I can't ever remember the order. But could we, if we're looking at this as a long-term goal, I've heard a couple of things that I think it would bode well for us as a council and some of the different committees to maybe, I'd like to suggest having a work session on this at some point so that we could maybe get for some of us who were not on council when we had the LID for Hornet Court, maybe a review on what that looked like. And then leading up to that, though, or maybe as a result of that, looking at maybe having the Traffic Safety Bike PED Committee connect and work in collaboration with the CDEC Committee on how to do some outreach to get neighborhoods or neighbors and residents to come and talk to us about prioritizing what they would, maybe what they're thinking, or just have them come and participate in the conversation about what does it look like to create a program to address the sidewalk gaps and repairs.
Love it. I'm looking at some folks from two of our most active neighborhood associations sitting right here from Greater Northeast and from West Keizer.
And they're both, one's on CDEC and Traffic Safety.
Fantastic. Councilor Kohler, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One of the challenges, is, as I've spent a little time with the Traffic Safety Bike PED Committee over the years, is that you end up with some folks that own their home that say, yeah, I'd really like to do this. And then there are other people that are a renter and the landlord says, I don't want to do that. So there's some things that historically had they've been impediments to move forward with those things.
That is an absolutely true statement. And that is one of those challenges that have to be addressed. Councilor Hussman?
As the liaison for the TSBP committee, Madam Mayor, I felt I should chime in. A lot can be sorted out in a committee meeting, would be a helpful forum with which to discuss. Definitely, it would be interesting to hear what the CDEC members would have to say regard to outreach, but at no point should renters be responsible for sidewalk repairs since they definitionally do not own the home. We should be targeting homeowners and property owners with anything related to sidewalk repairs. absolutely there should be a communication piece, but in terms of financial burden, I would find that very inequitable, to use a term from Councilor Duran, regarding how we want to proceed with that long-term goal.
And follow up on that, I don't really think anybody was suggesting that that's the case. Just that having somebody that owns that home and has been renting it for 25 years, they're not really excited about, oh yeah, I'm going to shell out a bunch of money for a sidewalk here. So that was what I was talking about, not equity between a renter and a homeowner as far as purchasing that.
Oh, and I completely understand, but if I would expect that same response if I was a homeowner owning a rental property, which is tough stuff. Your name's on the deed, it's your responsibility. I don't own a home, but last I checked, that's how it worked.
The one follow-up thought, and I'm going to toss this back to the committee, is to also, like I said, when I face plant, I make that phone call to code enforcement, but it would not take more than a New York second for me to go around my neighborhood, and there's probably a section in front of my house too, where sidewalks are not up to code, and that's going to come back on the property owner, and that's going to come as a heck of a shock. So other cities have actually done programs because there has been a reluctance or a lack of reporting over the years where the complaint-driven system has not resulted in the maintenance of sidewalks, and actually created a program of, okay, we're going to get you all up to a particular level, and then back to it's your responsibility, because as I understand, sidewalk ownership, it's an easement or some such, but the responsibility is the property owner, the homeowner, and it's on the homeowner's insurance. So if somebody face plants on your sidewalk, guess who's getting the phone call? It's the homeowner. And it's on your homeowner's insurance. Check with your agent. Again, I don't play a lawyer, and I don't play an insurance agent on TV. But I think it's important for us to have that conversation about what is this going to look like if we start looking at the condition of our sidewalks in our older neighborhoods, including mine. There's some people going to get some phone calls going, it's time for you to invest in that property and get that safe and passable. There's one that's complete gravel. If one home, I think you know which one I'm talking about. Yeah, pretty much. So I think that's, I'd like to see that part of the conversation about how do we deal with current sidewalks that are in poor condition. And the cost is going to be for existing homeowners to get that taken care of. Incentive, carrot and stick, it's got to get done at some point because they're not safe. And they're not accessible. If it's gravel in front of your house, somebody with a mobility device isn't going to be able to get through that effectively. So that's going to be a bigger conversation, and I look forward to us having that conversation, finally. Anything else on sidewalks? All right, fantastic. Thank you. That was a lot of good ideas.
You did play something on a video, not TV.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Yeah, that's right, I did.
For the next couple, I may lean on Mr. Witham for these, but I'll run through where we're at. For the River Cherry Overlay District, the council adopted that district. To implement some of the ideas, there may need to be a redevelopment incentives, but we have to have financing opportunities to pay for those. We are seeing some natural infill development that's coming in more dense than it is replacing, than what it's replacing. But so in some respects, this is happening organically. And we have some items in the strategic plan, the draft strategic plan related to the River Cherry Overlay District. So let's stop there and have Mr. Witham answer any questions.
Mr. Witham, do you want to talk to us a little bit about the River Cherry Overlay District?
Sure. I'd rather answer questions if you have questions. I mean, it is kind of hard. It's a long-term goal. I was here when these long-term goals were come up with, so I have my own perception of what River Cherry Overlay District means, and we have redevelopment incentives and financing opportunities. And a big piece of it is with the Keizer Revitalization Plan, which created the River Cherry Overlay District, which is an overlay zone, there were a whole bunch of items identified that if we are to achieve the vision in that revitalization plan, where we'd start seeing more mixed-use development, more walkable areas, there's a whole slew of things that the city can choose to do. Now, we didn't make a choice necessarily to say, oh, here's what we're doing, but things like public parking, things like redesigning River Road, which we kind of put a pin in until a future TSP update. So there was a whole lot of things, but one of the big issues is all of those things cost a lot of money. And so, when we got ARPA funds, I said, hey, should we just do River Road? We could spend it all. And of course, it was a joke. It was a joke. The tongue was in my cheek. But the reality is there's limited opportunities because we don't have the magical money tree. So I know we did do some very rough, Tim helped, this was back when Nate was still here, some very rough back of the napkin, what would it look like if we created an urban renewal district again? Because that's one of the primary tools that cities use to reinvest in spaces. Part of the problem is River Road is a little nicer than maybe what would be ideal for creating an urban renewal district, and the speed at which things are redeveloping where we're able to capture that tax increment piece is not, it doesn't pencil great. So it's a very hard one. I think it's a great long-term goal. I am frankly not smart enough to know how we find the magical money to do the fun things that would be awesome without having developers kind of drive those things. So that's my spiel on that. As I said, I'd rather answer questions.
All right, Councilor Hessman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Witham, happy to provide. We've entered 2024. What do you think could realistically get done to this goal by the end of 2024, say? Given where we're at right now as a city with the planning department as it is.
By the end of this year?
Yeah, just...
I think, so in the strategic plan that's clearly in a draft form, there were a few things that we looked at that were kind of tied to this long-range plan. One was to do a more formalized assessment of urban renewal district possibilities and what that might look like. I can't remember what the term was that we used, but something math and numbers, not Shane's world. So I would have to defer maybe to Mr. Wood over there to say, is that realistic that we could do an assessment by the end of 2024? But that's one of the pieces in the strategic plan. Another piece that we put in the strategic plan, which we made some tweaks to under input from council, one of the things that was called out in the revitalization plan was to do a kind of what did they call it? A safety and mobility audit of River Road, specifically in relation to rolling and walking and bikes, and kind of identify some of those hazardous areas, with a look to also analyze mid-block crossings in the south portion of River Road, which has been kind of identified in TSPs and anecdotally has been talked about for, as long as I've been around. And so I think those kinds of things, I think are realistic that we could possibly get those done within the next short term. But again, this is more kind of the long-term world we're talking about, like down the road. But I think to answer your short-term question, I think those kinds of things are realistic in the next year to two to accomplish those things if we designate appropriate funding towards getting that work done.
Totally. I appreciate you answering, and part of it is, what is it that we get done now that maybe helps set the wheels in motion, or so on and so forth. Mr. Brown, did you have something on this? I wanted to give you a chance to speak if you did.
I don't, actually. I think Mr. Witham answered that perfectly.
Okay.
This is a long-term goal, and there's a few things we can do to start the conversation.
Okay, no worries. I appreciate the level set on that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. I had a question, and looking at the River Cherry Overlay District, one of the things that when the climate-friendly and equitable community, affectionately known as CFEC rules, came out, our River Cherry Overlay District was looked at as, does this meet the intent of those rules? And we had the Council of Governments planners look at that, and it came out as a yes, we're good to go. So does this, for the most part? Yeah, well, close enough. And those rules are under review anyway. But to that end, does that make projects that we might want to develop, and this is getting to the second part of my question, eligible possibly then for grant funding? Should that come available because they are compliant?
I don't know the answer to that. There's been grant funding mostly for like studies related to doing some climate friendly area stuff that's come out through the grant funding cycles. I know they had some stuff where, cities could apply for grant funding to maybe have some market analysis work done, some things like that. I think Mr. Brown has a next slide because I think we talked about some of the CFIC stuff, so I think he'll hit on that.
Oh, there it is, yeah.
A little bit, but yeah, I'm not sure, Mayor Clark, I know really how to answer that question.
That's okay.
I think that, realistically, the work we did in the revitalization plan was definitely in the vein and in the spirit of what came out of the CFEC rules. I think our motivations were very different than the CFEC rules as motivations, but it was kind of that collateral benefit that we were able to realize. We did submit our climate-friendly areas, our walkable mixed-use area study to DLCD. I got some feedback, which I need to give them some more stuff. But we had to submit that by the end of the year, so I waited literally as long as I possibly could to submit it to see if some other news would come out of the courts. It didn't, so I had to turn it in. But we will need to make some changes to our development code, but less than had we not done that revitalization work first. So I don't know as far as grant funding what's going to come up. Generally it's hard. There's not a lot of grant funding for private type of redevelopment. It would only be for the public stuff. So yeah, I think time will tell as things roll out. I know there's a lot of money out for getting everybody's plans updated, like TSPs and all of those kinds of things kind of first. Yeah, exactly. You don't see it. The public doesn't see it.
Well, it sits on a shelf. But so that goes to the second part of my question is, can we start to plan out, and this would go back to you and the Planning Commission, looking at Councilor Duran, for starting some project development? It's kind of like our transportation system plan. We have the plan, but then Mr. Lawyer works with our team to pull out the projects that are then queued up for development. What can we start to pull out from the River Cherry Overlay District that would be project development? And this is, this is under long-range planning. I know it won't be done by the end of the year, but can we start to think about, especially with our Planning Commission and our and the Chamber of Commerce, other business entities, what are some projects we can begin to tease out of this that could go into project concept development? Because that's when you start to put get it off the paper and into reality.
Sure, yeah, I think, well, this is a little bit hard. This is an unprepared answer, so this is a kind of stream of consciousness, so bear with me, and
We're all good.
I'm going to reserve the right to change my mind at a future meeting, maybe. But I do think that safety mobility audit, and if we did an analysis of mid-block crossing needs, where they are, if they're needed, where they might be, I think that very much that initial work that we do in kind of the shorter term, the strategic plan kind of calls out a 5-year window. If we were to prioritize and get some of that work done, which is fairly low-hanging fruit, I think then that could easily, if you had an assessment through engineering that said, yeah, we need a mid-block crossing in the southern portion of River Road, and it should be at this point because it's going to serve this many PEDs, and it's going to be safer for people, you tee it up, and then you get into design right away. That's a pretty low threshold type of project. Obviously, the big one The big one that was looked at for the whole revitalization plan is the redesign of River Road to provide bike ped facilities along its stretch, which is hugely cumbersome, and there's a ton of properties. So that one is the one that's kind of pin until we go through the TSP update. And then at that point, it's going to be, you're probably going to have to look at it in sections. And it's probably going to be small pieces and maybe grant funded. I think the other ones that are in the revitalization plan, although they didn't really rise to the top, were things like surface parking lots or structured parking. That if you had opportunities for purchasing a property on River Road, the city purchases it or a private developer purchases it, you turn it into parking or structured parking, so you have a park once and walk to different businesses. It takes cars off the road, it consolidates, it allows you to densify existing sites. That would be another one, but like I said, that didn't like get a lot of folks excited when we went through the engagement process with that plan.
So just then to, again, we're not going to be here all night if we keep on this, but to talk about developing these types of project concepts with property owners, business interests, real estate, to understand what the actual needs are so we can develop projects that are responsive both to the private and public sector. So I'll put a pin in that. Anything else on River Cherry Overlay District? Stay tuned for some great work, Planning Commission.
Thank you. These actually are inextricably linked from the River Cherry Overlay District to the CFEC implementation. As you alluded to, we were in a good position because of the work done through the River Cherry Overlay District for the CFEC implementation, but there are benchmarks and tasks still required to be done for the CFEC implementation. So one being the walkable mixed-use areas study was completed this year. The implementation for zoning changes for walkable mixed-use areas is coming for 2024. And text amendments for the Keizer Development Code with public hearings and additional public outreach in 24. And then there's the scenario planning process is starting, and that will inform what we'll be looking for in the TSP, the Transportation Safety Plan update. And with the one thing, nice thing about the CFEC is that it drives us towards a grant-funded transportation plan update. So that is one of the good outcomes. So again, that would lead into the transportation system plan update, and we'll be working towards that, going on to the TSP. And I'll leave it there up through the transportation system plan and just open it up for questions.
Council President Starr, you had a question?
Not so much a question, but it is after 8, and so I start to turn into a pumpkin. But can we go through this document that I assume is posted on the website for the public and explain the acronyms or add a glossary? So if the public's looking at this document, they will know what those are. Like, I had to ask what KDC was, right? Because I don't think in that language, so.
It's not a chicken place, is it?
No, apparently it is our development code. So we internally might know that, but if we're wanting our public to engage, I'd ask us to go back and explain the acronyms. Thank you.
Can do that.
We used to have a little cop up here for those infractions. We might have to get it back out. Well, especially with former City Councilor Walsh. He was a frequent contributor. Just say. Then on the transportation system plan, this is something that we know is going to be coming up, and state funding. This is expensive. And we're still using the one we have. It's not outdated per se. It has projects that are still, like I talked about, the sidewalk delineations and so forth. So, and it keeps us eligible for the federal funds that are coming for larger projects like Wheatland, Verta, and we'll start punching for the next one, get that into the queue. That's part of what I do on the Salem Keizer area transportation study. Our metropolitan planning organization is make sure that our projects are getting the attention and the funding that I know they deserve as part of our regional system. So I have that meeting tomorrow. Woo! All right. And last but not least.
Last but not least, we have got some quick wins on our website overhaul. I put here that we have a dream team created of 4 superstar employees to look at our website. They were able to get some immediate fixes, so it is mobile friendly again. And they're going to actually come to our executive leadership team to go over the process and some of the things they're looking at to explain to us. So they're also looking at whether we should continue with our current website host or should we should go out for a proposal.
Okay.
And some of the new imagery that we received, in fact, the previous slide, or 3 slides back, on the River Cherry Overlay District, that was one of our new images from Jason Lewis Media. And then the pictures there on the front, also from our new imagery, that they did a fantastic job for them. Give them a little bit of a plug. So you'll see some of those new images rotating on our website.
All right. Council President Starr and then Councilor Kohler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And kudos to the team. It's very nice to be able to access it from a mobile device again. So thank you to that. What does it mean when you say the team is reviewing whether to use current vendor to update or to do a request for proposal? Like, what are they looking at? What's the timeline? Like, what are we?
I think actually this one falls closer into our short-term goals than long-term goals. This is something that could perhaps be done by the end of the year. They are our current, I won't use the name, but we have a current provider. This tech space is kind of peculiar, unique to government. So there's, anybody can put up a web page, but there is a unique niche for the government, local government space. And so there's lots of vendors out there. And we have one that is very reasonably priced. It's very low cost. They've been wanting to do some updates, but for whatever reason, the system we had before was preventing them from doing some of these basic ones that they went ahead and implemented. But there's more that they believe that could be done, and using them, we would have a one-time cost in getting them to get us to where they think we fully should be. But the alternative to that is they're looking at what else is in the possibility in the field. What else, should we include a customer resource management system in a website? Should we have, we had a system where frequently asked questions were automatically updated by the amount of times they were clicked on. So the most clicked on ones would always go to the top. And so there's a lot of things that can be done. The team has taken a very methodical, analytic approach towards evaluating our current system versus other systems.
Great. Thank you.
Any questions on the website? And thank you for the work on this. Oh, did I have someone? Councilor Kohler? Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. One of the things that I've heard from several of my constituents is that they would like to be able to go to the city website and click on something to pay their utility bill rather than go to a couple different drop-down menus and try to figure out where it is to get to the place where they can pay their utility bill. And so I think that would be very helpful to just have that on the front page like the 5 that are there. Have that down there so they can go click and pay their bill.
Thank you. Pass that on to them.
And that would be a frequently asked question. How do I pay it?
That's what I hear.
Yep.
We want them to pay their bill too.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
I gave up on the pay it myself. I just hit automatic. Anyway, thank you very much. Great suggestion. And again, if you've got feedback from people, encourage them to send that information in or go ahead and get it to Mr. Brown to get it to the team for further work.
Yep.
That gets us to the end of the list.
Yeah, I'd just like to wrap up by saying we are very thin groups. There's a lot of ground that we've covered, and there's not a lot of depth behind the people sitting around, the staff sitting around the table here. So most of the projects at these level we're trying to do ourselves, and then where we can harness some of our front employees, pulling them into it. So it's a juggling match to try to get all of these worked on. But we're halfway through these short-term period, and I think we can accomplish most of these goals.
Any other questions or comments from council? Relevant to the topic at hand. Oh, I guess we do need food. All right. Anything further from the team? All right. I want to thank everybody very much. This has been a great conversation, and appreciate the work of the entire staff team for continuing to take the input from us 7 who are working to represent the interests of the people of Keizer and making them reality. We really rely on you to take thoughts and get it out there. With that, the time is 8:21. We are adjourned.
So Chief